Hey, welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is KDK, Kyo Daiken. Today's review, we're going to take a look at the brand new Rick Dangerous. This is the Pi 4 image that he released about several weeks ago. You can find this currently on Arcade Punks. Now be aware that even though it may list at 256 gigabytes, in most cases you will need to have a 400 gigabyte SD card in order to load this. This image will work with an SSD. I am using a Samsung T5 SSD. That's how I burned it today and got it to load. But I have a lot of questions and reservations about this particular image. It does look nice. All the games do work. This is using the RETROPie 4.6.8 build, which is one of the latest images or builds that they have worked on. Now, I did have some problems with this. This is backwards compatible. It does work on the Pi 4 8 gigabyte model. However, it does have the video issue problem. That's something I did cover in one of my several videos. I do know that a lot of the other images have had that fix yet. But keep in mind, not every Pi image is backwards compatible or forwards compatible to work with either the Pi 4 4 gigabyte model or 8. If you do try to load this image on the Pi 4 8 gigabyte model, you will have the video loading issues, as you guys can currently see on the screen. Let's get into this video because surprisingly, this image was only, even though it's 256 gigabytes or so, roughly, it only has 2,596 games. That kind of concerned me a little bit. And aside from that, I will probably have to say this is probably one of my most disliked Pi images that's ever been released. Let's go ahead and get into this video and cover everything. All right, so here we have the Rick Dangerous Pi 4 image. This is made off of the official build. Let's take a look at a lot of the settings and everything that is here. You're getting 2,596 games available. And I do believe that this was all handpicked. However, even though this is handpicked, I do believe that number is really lackluster, considering that this is a 256 quote unquote image for the Pi. I don't see it really taking advantage of a lot of the Pi capabilities that is capable on the Pi 4. So as you can see, he already has 17 games that are your favorites. We're going to take a look. We have Amiga, 230 games. Amstrad, 30 games. We have Arcade, 250 games available. That's really shy of what really the Pi can do, and that's why I have my personal feelings about this image. Atari 2600, 70 games. Atari 7800, 720. Atari 800, 30 games. Atari Lynx, 25. Atomic Wave, 10. Commodore 130. Sega Dreamcast, 160 games. So we'll talk about a little bit about that a little bit later. But as you guys can see, this is the entire set. Now, I will admit that this is probably one of the largest Sega Dreamcast sets I have ever seen on any Pi device. So that's a pretty nice accomplishment there. Famicom 10, Famicom 25, Game Boy Advance 100, Game Boy Color 25, Sega Master System 60, Sega Mega Drive 245, MSX 10, MSX 220, Neo Geo CD 25 games, Neo Geo 30, Nintendo Entertainment System 150. Nintendo Entertainment System is it's about 700 games or so, 720, 750 entirely. So that's a really low end number on the number of NES games you can get. MS DOS, you're getting 45. PC Engine, you're getting 70. PC Engine CD, 50 games. Ports, you're getting 10. There's some pretty nice games in here. I was looking at Super Mario War and Wolfenstein, and let's see what else is there. Doom Phase 1 and Doom Phase 2. So he has a nice little selection in here. PlayStation, you get 205 games. I do believe the current number for the entire ROM set is somewhere around 700. Scum VM 101. That's probably one of the largest Scum VM sets I've ever seen. Genesis 32X 15 games. Sega CD 40. Super Famicom 75 games. Sega SG 1000 15. Super Nintendo 165. That's really lackluster. X68020 games, Sinclair ZX Spectrum 130 games available, and then of course you have your standard options. Now, uh, you guys may be spoiled with some of the other images and builds that come out where you have more options, but again, this is the official RetroPie base. You don't get all those additional bells and whistles like a marquee script or aspect ratio, or a size monitor where you could pick your video aspect ratio and things. So this is very bare bones, is what you would typically get with a standard RetroPie image. And then of course he went through and selected all of his favorite collections. For those of you guys new to my channel or watching this, collections isn't an additional list of games that you have on your Pi device. This is a list comprised of everything that you already have. So if I looked in this 2,596 games here that is listed, you would find collections are based on this particular image. So with that being said, we're going to take a look at a couple of other things. I did play all the games on this image, or actually most of the games for Sega Saturn and not Sega Saturn, I'm sorry, but Sega Dreamcast and several other games, and they all work fine. So this is a really nice image as far as the look. I believe this is his custom theme, so this is really nice, the time and the work that he put in here. Here's where my gripe really starts. As you guys know, I first started working on the Pi 4 image last year. I did the launch video showing that RetroPie was able to work on the Raspberry Pi 4. And in that video and over the time, I've shown you guys the full potential of what the Pi 4 can do. With the exception of a couple of games on here, I would say a couple of systems rather, there's nothing on here that says, hey, I need to buy a Pi 4 specifically for this image. All the arcade games that are on here will work with the Pi 3B Plus. A lot of the other systems here, all these will work on the Pi except Atomic Wave. But for the most part, most of the systems that are on here will work perfectly fine with the Pi 3B Plus. Now, the Sega Dreamcast that is on here is obviously using Redream. I do have a specific video on that. You guys could check out the tutorials on that when it was first implemented. I think it was actually September of last year where Sega Redream was implemented into RetroPie. So, but aside from that, what I'm saying is that there's a lot of Sega Dreamcast games on here. And to get an entire arcade, or I would say entire Pi image with only 2,596 games, that's not a lot. And what I mean by that is, here, let me show you guys something really quick. We're going to scroll over to my desktop. And one of the things that I look at on how I particularly measure a Pi image is I look at size to aspect ratio, or size ratio, depending upon what type of image you're making. For example, if I'm making a 32 gigabyte image or a 64 gigabyte image, I'm not going to load it down with some of the biggest ROMs you could possibly imagine. I know Damaso, he released a 64 gigabyte image some time ago, and what he did was he trimmed the fat off of that image. So he deleted a lot of video snaps so he could make room for a lot of games. This is what I refer to or call a potato chip bag image. You have a 256, again, quote unquote, card or image that you have in front of you, but you only have 2,000 games. So it's like getting a potato chip bag. I love sour cream and onion chips. And you open the bag and there's nothing in there except all of that air they put in there. And so all that nitrogen that they put in there. So you open up and then you come to find out, well, the bag is only half full. I mean, it has half, is full of air and then the other half is full of chips. What I'm saying is, if you look at this Dreamcast set, you have PSX is 86 gigs, Dreamcast 85, Scum VM 35, PC CD is 14 gigabytes. That's pretty much the majority of your card. And what I'm saying is this, is let's say if we look at this Dreamcast set, this one game is 957 megabytes. This game, San Francisco Rush, 950 megabytes. I don't know how important this is to some people. I don't know how important these games are to the particular image maker. But where I'm going with this is if 4 or 5 games were deleted just from this specific ROM set, you could have fit in the entire NES, SNES, Sega Master System, and several other consoles. On top of that, because these games are here, this is what has caused you guys to have to go out and buy an additional higher end memory card just to see what is on here. And this image maker could have saved you a lot of time by simply trimming the fat. I have images that I've made and I've looked at and I was like, man, I wanted to make my arcade image 32 gigabytes, but it ended up around 40. So if I'm gonna make it 40, hell, I might as well try to fill it up to about 64. I mean, why not? I mean, if you're already at about 40, you're way past 32, so try to make it 64. Or if I'm at about, let's say, 90 or so, I can't get it down to 64, why not just go ahead and make it 128? All I'm saying is having attention to detail and being conscious about you, the buyer, because even though this is free stuff, you still have time to download it, and then you have to burn it to your SD card. And then a lot of you have problems trying to get it to work, and then you have all these different file sizes. So where I'm going with this is all of this could have been prevented by deleting a couple of games. Deleting a couple of games from a particular ROM set. Now, I don't know how good some of these games are to some people, but I mean, personally, Sonic isn't really my favorite, or Chicken Run. But you guys get what I'm saying, is that several games could have been deleted from here to make room and make sure that it would fit on a 256 gigabyte card without you guys having to spend money. And screw it. Why not? If it's already over at 256 and you're over at 271, some of the file sizes some of you guys are getting, you could have pushed the margin all the way up to 400 gigabytes. And there's a ton of stuff you could have added to 400 gigabytes. Apparently, there's no Naomi games on here. That would have fit perfectly with this type of image. And then, of course, there's also games lacking from the Atomic Wave section as well. So, but again, one of the things that I like to see, or I look at an image, is, we all have different preferences as far as what an image has to offer. This particular image, I think, would have been geared more towards having a Sega image or a Sega Dreamcast or something else, maybe like a PlayStation or a Sega remix specifically for the Pi 4. I don't see this being a generic Pi 4 for the average everyday user, or really any people in particularly, due to the fact that there's a lot of stuff that's missing on here that really pushes the boundaries of what the Pi 4 can do. Again, in the arcade set, and I'll scroll through the arcade set really quick. There are no CHD games on here. CHD games are games like NFL Blitz, Area 51, Mace. Those are CHD games, and none of those games would work on the Pi 3B Plus. There's nothing here in the arcade ROM set and most of the console sets that would justify anybody needed to either buy a Pi 4 to burn this particular image. Now, I know a lot of you may have a difference of opinion to say, yeah, it looks like a great image and stuff, but what I'm really focusing on is, why do I need to buy a Pi 4 to download this? Other than the fact that several of the Atomic Wave games and Dreamcast games that are on here, there's nothing in the arcade or several of the other games on here or consoles that really pushes the margin as far as what it can do. Most of these games on here, you'll be perfectly fine if you already had a 3B Plus. I mean, this is a standard set for any 3B Plus image. I mean, I don't see open bore. I'm not knocking that. I do believe that they had a specific purpose for that, but all I'm saying is, even PlayStation, you could have added in several other PlayStation games on here, several different arcade titles as well. Even at the least, deleting one of those games that are about 700 megabytes or so, you could have fit the entire ROM set for Super Nintendo and also NES on here. Last year, there was, if you guys are familiar with Supreme Unified, somebody released they took that base image, a really good base image, and loaded it up with a bunch of ROMs. And the reason why that image really got on my nerves, in fact, was ranked, as far as I'm concerned, one of the worst Pi images ever made, it's not the fact that I understand that people are putting in attention to detail to or spending in their time to make an image, but you made an image and none of the games worked. And it's not the fact that none of the games just worked. You picked the largest ROM sets possible. None of the Daphne games worked. That's 30 gigs alone that took up somebody's time, or somebody figured out, hey, maybe I need a 200 gig card to download this image. I believe the image was 200 gigabytes, but all I'm saying is look at the size to aspect ratio, make sure your stuff works, and then also make sure is one or two games worth it when you could have added in maybe the entire ROM set for a specific platform. That's all I'm saying. And so with this, I've seen a lot of the comments online that have been on Arcade Punks in the forums, and people are having they want to try this image, but they can't because everybody's trying to bounce around and say, hey, well, I tried the SSD, but now I need to have an SD card. But if I have an SD card right now, I only have 256. So now I got to go out and go buy a $400 gigabyte card, or maybe, get it shipped from Amazon just to test it out. And that's fine, however you want to approach it. But again, all I'm simply saying is all of that could have been prevented and avoided if 5 games were deleted. 5 games. If 5 games were deleted from the Sega Dreamcast set alone, everybody would be able to burn this to any type of particular image, some particular SD card or whatever the case might be. Somebody said, well, maybe this wasn't Pi Shrunk. Well, yeah, this was Pi Shrunk, because if it wasn't, this would probably be, what was it, maybe 400 gigs, whatever the case might be. Now, I did see some notes. Somebody said somewhere that there was 90 gigabytes free. Okay, I'll update the video description later and look for the actual file size of this particular image to see exactly how much room is left. But again, guys, that's just my 2 cents on looking at how images are made and looking at this particular image. I do think he did a great job with the theme and going through some of the collections and adding it. However, for a 256 gigabyte genre, so to speak, which is actually about 300 whatever, I do believe that it's really lackluster, and why this is probably one of my most disliked images next to that Pi 3B Plus image I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of games that could have been added for this. For 2,596 games available, there's a lot of good games that could have been added from other systems from their entire library. Like Nintendo's about 700, SNES is about the same too. So there's a lot of good gems that have been missed. So hopefully maybe if they do another update in the future, somebody could have added that. But I just wanted to chime in on this, let you guys know what I thought about this particular image and what I think about image making. I do believe that an image maker, such as myself or anybody, should trim the fat. If you're getting close to, if you think you're a little over, 64 gigabytes, trying to keep all the memory card sizes in mind to help out the community, there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, well, maybe I could delete a game or two to try to make it under that radar. And then if not, if you're over 64 gigabytes, you might as well fill it up a little bit more till you get to about 128 or so. And then if you're at 128 or a little bit over, well, might as well try to fill it up till you get about 256. But again, I understand everybody has a personal preference, but in this particular case, I don't see there's any harm with deleting 4 or 5 games to get it on a particular size card. All right, guys, that's my 2 cents on this review. Check out my other videos relating to Pi 4. This is Keel Dyke signing out. I'll catch you later.